I'm Chris Carter. This is the Locked On Steelers podcast. Are the Steelers closer to trading for a wide receiver from the 49ers? We talk about that with Nick Farabaugh of SteelersNow.com. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day, because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets back with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. As I said before, we're joined by the man, Nick Farabaugh. He's back on the show from SteelersNow.com. Nick, it's great to have you, buddy, but we're seeing some rumblings back on the rumor trade mill. It's all over the place. Everyone's talking about, are the Niners back in play? Because now it's post June 1, so we know contracts have set in, so owners and GMs don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. And now the Niners have signed Juwan Jennings, so there's a lot of people saying, whoa, wait a second. Does that mean Deebo Samuel? Does that mean Brandon Aiyuk? Are the Steelers really in for this? Let me get your reaction, Nick. Is there any change in your mind about the chances of the Steelers getting one of those Niners wide receivers or another number 2 or number 1 wide receiver in the NFL trade market?
No. I thought
killed all of it right away. One word.
Right. No. I thought, Chris, I've been saying this for 2 months or so. I didn't even expect it at the draft, but if it wasn't going to happen at the draft, I said it was going to happen closer to the season, training camp, somewhere around there. That's where I expect this to happen. If it does happen. Why? Because you look at a lot of the situations that they're embroiled in, and even the Niners situation with Aiyuk. It's contract related, folks. There is no rush for a team like the 49ers when you have a player like Brandon Aiyuk to trade him if you can sign him long-term. He's a bona fide wide receiver 1 in this league. You do not trade that guy unless you absolutely have to, unless everything deteriorates around that situation to where it is untenable. And the 49ers have experience in this. Why? Because they just went through it. Deebo Samuel did the same thing, held out last year, and then they signed him long-term. And so they have enough cap space. They do have enough cap space this year to accommodate a Brandon Aiyuk big-time deal. Now, we see that deal is probably going to get more and more expensive too, which adds more complications to the 49ers, but also the Steelers side of it, because he's going to get $30+ million a year now probably, or somewhere around there, because you see the Amon-Ra St. Brown deal, the A.J. Brown deal, the Jalen Waddle deals all coming in between $28 million and $32 million. Aiyuk probably slots in maybe right bang in the middle there, about $30 million. So that's going to be an expensive deal. Would the Steelers even do that? Because they would also have to give up probably a first or second round pick to get him. And feels like, to me, what's going to end up happening with the 49ers, Chris, is maybe they sign Aiyuk, maybe they don't. But this is the last chance. Brock Purdy's on his rookie contract one more time. This is the run it back one more time year. And I think next year you see someone moved from that wide receiver room. Probably Deebo Samuel, I think, is the likeliest to be moved, and Aiyuk will stay long-term. That's just my feel of that. So I don't think the Niners are even the likeliest guys. I think it's possible if the Aiyuk talks just go completely south and just he feels disrespected, something like that happens where he demands out. Maybe that's where, we start talking about him. I always thought the more likely ones were the tier 2 or tier 3 guys. And we're talking, Courtland Sutton, Darius Slayton. Before he signed a contract, I would have thrown Juwan Jennings in here. I think that could have actually potentially happened. But I think someone like Courtland Sutton or Darius Slayton makes a lot of sense. Guys that are 2s, 3s that want new deals, maybe the teams don't want to give them there. The Giants just drafted Malik Neighbors. They have young guys in Wan'Dale Robinson and Jalen Hyatt. Maybe they want to get those guys more playing time. The Broncos have been kind of in this shift mode, drafting Troy Franklin. They brought in, Josh Reynolds. They brought in some new faces. Bo Nix is there, of course, but they traded Jerry Jeudy. So maybe, that's a spot where they would try and pry him loose. And then I think there's obviously other names, that we aren't even talking about right now. I know some people have thrown around, the Seahawks guys like Metcalf and Lockett because of the June 1st stuff. But this is going to take a minute, I think, to kind of come together. to calcify, if you will. The Steelers have been calling around the market for a long time. They've been doing it since Deontay got traded, and nothing's come out of it. So I think training camp, August, somewhere around that time is when we're going to see a move made, if one is made, Chris.
I'm right with you. This is not something that I think is more pressing because of this now. I know that it's June and we all would like some fun things to talk about. And I think that's where some of this comes from, is people get bored in football and they're just like, we need something exciting to get us going. I still think it's even likely that the Steelers make one more addition to their wide receiver room this offseason via trade, signing, whatever. I think that it is likely that another addition is coming, but I don't think it's likely that happens before training camp. I think it might even happen during training camp. I think they might wait to see how some of these guys play in training camp, and then we go from there and we see how guys play. And then they're like, okay, guess what? We think this guy can play here, that guy can play there, but we have a hole here. We're going to get this type of wide receiver. And that's what the Steelers, that's what I think their plan has been this whole time. I know there's been a lot of excitement around it, but I think they're going to continue to be patient in this regard. And patience has worked out for Omar Khan. So I don't think Steelers fans should get too upset about that.
Yeah, and listen, one of these contract situations, they need it to get ugly. I mean, they need something to disconnect. Courtland Sutton seems like the most likely one to me right now. I know the rumors mill has been, talking about they don't want to trade Courtland Sutton, yada, yada, yada. I think that's probably true right now, but we've seen stuff like that deteriorate and change in a month's time. That's probably possible. And 15 to 16 million is his parent asking price. Doesn't seem crazy to me for where he would be at. So he seems likely to me, Chris. And the timeline, I don't think has shifted. Once they didn't trade for someone on draft night or one of the 2 nights in the draft, I thought maybe Courtland Sutton on day 2 would make sense. If you were going to trade for Aiyuk, you would probably have to give up 20. If once they didn't make those deals, I think it was pretty clear that we were waiting throughout the summer for this to happen. And I'll say this, it's possible that none of these guys become available. It is possible that there is not a tier 1-2 guy that gets traded. It's possible Stephon Diggs was the only guy, outside of Deontay Johnson, of course, that got moved.
Right.
It's possible. Or maybe the Steelers are going to have to shift their targets down and kind of read out what teams are doing in the preseason and guys that emerge in the preseason that maybe make someone expendable. Something like that, I think, is something to watch. So we could be talking, even last year where, you had guys that get released or are on the outs of the team. They're, redundant. Like the Steelers trade Kevin Dotson and Kendrick Green last year. Could the Steelers maybe get a wide receiver from that? Maybe someone from Houston, like a John Mechie, who is maybe not, a Courtland Sutton or a Darius Slayton, a proven 2, but is an upside pick. Is that maybe they have to set their sights less towards proven and more towards upside? We're going to have to see how this kind of rolls out, but it's possible that there might not be a proven guy that actually does get pried loose, and they might have to take an upside swing on someone like that.
I want to talk more about the impact of what bringing in one of these different types of receivers. Because we've now mentioned several names, from the Aiyuks and the Metcalfs to the Suttons and the Mechies. We got and all these guys, different categories of wide receivers, and would require different types of money. How will that impact what the Steelers are doing right now, and how would that impact the play status as far as how Arthur Smith's constructing the offense and what he's focusing on? All that here and more on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, with Nick Farabaugh. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, we'll remind you this show is brought to you by FanDuel. It's finals time at both the NBA and the NHL. Baseball is also in full swing, and that makes FanDuel your number 1 place to place a bet on every single game. Game 1 of the NBA Finals is giving the Celtics 6.5 points, and Jason Tatum is the favorite for NBA Finals MVP at -120 are his odds there, and there are plenty of options there too, along with Luka Doncic and all the great players that'll be in that series. Right now, new customers can get $150 back in bonus bets with any winning $5 or more bet made on FanDuel right now, where you can download an app right to your phone or go to the website FanDuel.com. That's $150 to use on point spreads, on money lines, player props, and so much more. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all in an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use by visiting FanDuel.com/LockedOn, and take advantage of this offer today. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn for new customers to get $150 back in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. And that's again from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Nick Farabaugh. Nick, let's talk a little bit how these different signings or trades, whatever, could work for the Steelers if they were to happen in the first place. So let's, we go over, you mentioned the guys like Aiyuk, maybe a guy like Deebo Samuel, guys that are going to cost you upwards of $25-ish million a year. Guys are going to be a pretty penny to spend on if they trade, not just in the trade market, what it would take to get them, but the money to keep said player on your roster. If you sign that guy with George Pickens in his third year in the NFL, his deal will be up after next season. So after the 2025 season in 2026, does that altogether just basically say Pickens will not be a Steeler after that contract is done? Or is there a way to work around that with if they get a receiver that requires that kind of a contract?
Well, everything is so hard to predict after this year because there's so many free agents. I think that makes this much harder to predict. Theoretically, I can look at the cap situation and say, sure, they can accommodate Brandon Aiyuk and George Pickens, but George Pickens is going to get, has another really good year like last year. And his number is going to start with a 2. So that's going to make it pretty tough. What happens at quarterback? Freiermuth, Daniels, Hayward, Watt's going to be coming up soon enough for another re-up deal too. I mean, there's a lot of different things that go into this. But I think, let's just say normalcy kind of comes, we see a space eaten up by a lot of players. I think it's tougher to keep him long-term. Like if you're paying Aiyuk $30 million, can you also pay George Pickens, say 25? I think that's pretty tough. What could happen is something similar to what we're kind of seeing right now in Cincinnati. Little different because both of them are young, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. But, Chase is probably going to get the long-term deal there, and they're franchise tagging Higgins basically into oblivion. We could see Pickens hit with the franchise tag. I wouldn't be surprised. Like that's something, keep him basically on a first, a fifth-year option, essentially, is what that would become. I think that's a possibility if you do an Aiyuk trade. If you do someone like Courtland Sutton, who is, say, 15, 16 million a year, if that's correct, I think it becomes very easy at that point to extend Pickens. I think you can do that because Pickens is then your top guy. Sutton, is 29, probably would only be like 2 years for 32 or something around there, 3 years at most. So it wouldn't be a contract that anchors you down. Meanwhile, if you got like Aiyuk, right, that's probably like 4 or 5 years. That's significant.
Yeah.
So it's a little different. But I think if you put Aiyuk in there, it's harder to see them keeping George Pickens long term. Now, I think they would put him on the tag probably. I think that would make a lot of sense for them to do after his rookie contract would expire. But who knows what the drama would come with that, et cetera, et cetera. You know how franchise tags can get a little messy if you don't intend to extend that person.
Right.
I mean, the Bengals right now, T. Higgins is not around. So
right.
We'll kind of see what goes there. But I think if Aiyuk probably does lessen the chances that you have Pickens around. But hey, I mean, if they don't make, a stunning move at quarterback and don't add a big name quarterback, don't pay quarterbacks a significant amount and they have a rookie deal, I think theoretically you could swing that. I don't think it's impossible to swing Aiyuk and Pickens if you say draft a quarterback in the first round and have them on a rookie deal. The 49ers are looking at that right now where they're paying, Bosa, all of these players, Trent Williams, Deebo, Ayuk's going to get paid. McCaffrey's getting paid. They have so many high-name free agents getting paid a lot of money. The Steelers, if they get a quarterback on a rookie deal, could potentially give big contracts all across the roster. And Pickens and Aiyuk, if that did happen, I think is feasible. It would be tougher, but I don't think it's like far-fetched.
I hear you on that, but let's expand our scope now to some of the other receivers, like a Courtland Sutton, who, if the Steelers traded for right now, Courtland Sutton is a $17.3 million cap hit for the Denver Broncos. If the Broncos were to keep the dead money there, he'd be a $7.7 million hit on the Steelers, and then like a $14 million hit the next year. That those would be the numbers there. If they traded for him, or would that still be in the realm of possibilities to keep a George Pickens long term? Or would they need to kind of settle for a John Mechie or someone with upside that you're hoping works out as a number 2, who you don't have to pay a lot for?
See, I think a Sutton deal, because he's 29, is a little different than Aiyuk, right? What's Aiyuk, 26? Like he's very young. So you want Aiyuk for 5 years. You want him until he's 31. You don't need Courtland Sutton past, you can get him for 2 years, 32, guaranteed deal, whatever that is, but you can have him for 2 years, and then it really wouldn't overlap with George Pickens. So you would easily be able to extend Pickens. So I don't think a guy like Sutton, for example, impacts Pickens' future that much, because if it is, like, let's say Sutton is, 2 years, $32 million, he's gone essentially by the time Pickens' actual contract starts to kick in. If you expect that to be, George Pickens for like 4 or 5 years, before his actual cap hit increases, Courtland Sutton's basically gone already. So it's not going to be a significant uptick. So I think a guy like that you can keep. Darius Slayton, same way, right? He's getting like $6 million a year. Yeah, you'll probably have to pay him like 12 to get him, but like, again, that's not crazy. You can keep that George Pickens as the one in that case. So I think it really depends on the high level of these guys you're going after. But I don't think Sutton makes George Pickens staying long-term any less likely. I think it actually maybe makes it more likely. It feels like that's the trade you make if you want to get a guy now that can upgrade the 2 spot, but George is your long-term guy that you want to invest in.
Let me ask you this. How much of this also weighs upon how they feel about George in training camp if he takes a step up, not necessarily just in his play, but in his maturity? Because to me, a big part of what they need to see out of George Pickens this year isn't just him producing more in the passing game, but it's not having plays where he doesn't block, or not having immature responses like he did to when he was asked about why he didn't block, and things like that, and seeing that part of his game start to go into his past, and more him seeing, coming off like a professional at all times, that you can build a wide receiver group around. How much is this decision of getting a Courtland Sutton who you can build with Pickens, or getting a bigger name wide receiver, which means you're moving on for Pickens? Do you think that that's weighing at all into that decision, or the Steelers just kind of look to get who they can get and just move forward from there?
I think it would weigh more if they had legitimately multiple options. I'm not sure they do right now. If you legitimately had the choice of Aiyuk versus Sutton, I think that would be a real contention point. I think right now we don't even know if they have any of those options. So if Sutton becomes available and you want to win a playoff game this year, that urgency that Art Rooney talked about, I keep coming back to that. Every single move they make should be viewed through the scope of his comments. Every single thing that he said, urgency to win a playoff game, needs to be viewed through that. So if they want to win this year, you want a guy that helps you win this year. So Sutton or Aiyuk does that. And really, I don't think it matters as much the long-term implications of that, because really, when you look at it, it's a limited market already. So really, you're comparing Courtland Sutton to like Treylon Burks. Massively different levels of players. So that's really what you're doing. Now, if let's say we get to July and both of these contract situations are significantly worse, both of them are going to be traded, I think that's when you bring this in, because Aiyuk is obviously the guy you can build around. He can be your wide receiver one. He can be the guy you just know is there, the dependable one that's going to be your guy in the pass game. That's a different story. And so I think that's when it weighs in there. I think when we talk about, though, the consideration of trading for a guy with George's long-term view, I think that's when this maturity discussion comes out. Because is Omar Khan really sitting there right now thinking he trades for Brandon Aiyuk and thinks, what does that mean for George? I'm not sure yet he does, because I think George is ideally in their long-term plans. I think they love the player. But what is he going to bring fully on the field, off the field? I think that's the big question when you're talking about this move. But right now, they don't really have the luxury of picking and choosing, because right now, Chris, I think you and I would agree, there is no market.
Right.
So that market needs to develop. If we get Sutton and Aiyuk on the market and we start to talk about that, that's when I think you see the considerations.
I think that's where that's why I think there's every reason to. People understand the Steelers are going to be patient here. They're not going to rush. They're going to wait to see how things play out, both with Pickens and with the rest of the roster. Because like you said, it's all about seeing who else is around Pickens in all of this, in this entire matchup. I think there's a lot of things to consider there, certainly moving forward, especially how it all fits in with Arthur Smith's offense. We've talked about how he wants to pound the ball. He wants to run the ball. He wants to be strong, but he also does want a passing attack. Like you still need a balanced offense. It's just that you can lead with the run and then flip to the pass. We'll get all to more of that throughout the week, but I want to talk to Nick about another Steelers rookie who we haven't had a chance to talk much about, and that's Payton Wilson, because I caught up with him last week, and I thought he gave some really good sharp comments in the Steelers locker room after one of the OTAs practices. And does this give us a look inside to see if he plays significant time this year? We'll see about that here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, we'll remind you the show is also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the app you can download right to your phone to buy tickets for all your favorite events without it being stressful. Now that we know the NFL schedule, it's time to book your Steelers tickets for the 2024 season. The best place to do that is with Game Time. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all your sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. They give you killer deals even on last-minute tickets, and they have the best price guarantee that can't be beat, and you can save up to 60% off buying tickets even up to the last minute for sports, concerts, and so many different events. If you want Christmas Day tickets to the Steelers versus the Chiefs, Game Time's got those. If you want the home opener against the Chargers, you bet they've got that too. Plan your trip to Acrisure Stadium to root on your Pittsburgh Steelers. Plus, the Game Time best price guarantee means that you'll always get the best price no matter what. If you find tickets in the same section row for less somewhere else, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference of those prices. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase, or go to the website gametime.co. Terms and conditions apply. Create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter here with Nick Farabaugh of SteelersNow.com. Nick, let's talk about Payton Wilson for a bit. Let's let Payton Wilson talk a little bit. Payton Wilson, of course, the linebacker at NC State, the Steelers drafted in the third round. They was a guy that I talked about a lot leading up to the draft. Wasn't sure where he'd fall because of his injury history, but I loved his tape. I loved his athleticism. It was all about could he withstand and hold up in the NFL. Well, at least for OTAs, I thought it was interesting to catch up with him and hear how he's contributing. And there's a little bit, Nick, here about how he feels he's going to be contributing even as a rookie. Without further ado, here's Payton Wilson in the Steelers OTAs after Steelers OTAs practices last week in the Steelers locker room.
What's it been like running in a group of linebackers, the veterans have been for a while?
Yeah, it's super cool. I mean, guys like Patrick Queen, E-Rob, even Cole Holcomb, who's obviously out of the picture right now, but they've been amazing to me and the other young linebacker, Kobe, just taking us in and, just teaching us the game, teaching us the speed of the game. And, I mean, it's a blessing to be around them and compete with them.
Your instincts, your reactions to things at NC State, I covered things, so I saw you in the ACC. Sometimes it seemed like you were just doing so many things instinctively. What's the biggest thing you have to do to make that more of a natural part of your game in the NFL?
Yeah, I think it's just continuing to learn the defense, Obviously, it's a lot different than what I ran at NC State, but, I mean, you can't play fast and you can't be instinctual until you know that you're not giving something up, right? So just knowing 100% what you have every single play and what everybody has around you just lets you play so much faster. Like, hey, if it's a certain pass concept, I can let it go to this person or this person. So
what's Coach Curry been like so far?
He's amazing. He's one of my – I've only been here since, like, May 9th, and he's one of my favorite people I've ever been around. He's just so joyful, so happy, just, loves the game of football. And every day, I mean, he's not really one to cuss you out. I mean, he will if you mess up bad enough, but he's more inspiring, more helpful, and just, willing to slow down to teach the young guys.
Your skill, you had 3 picks last year, a bunch of breakups. You've been primed to cover the pass.
Yeah.
Have you ever been talking about how any specific ways you'll be using this defense against the pass, or you kind of just be integrated with all of it?
Yeah, I mean, I've just been integrated with all of it. In our dime situations, I'm the backer that's out there. So just, being able to cover man, whether it's a tight end or running back, sometimes even on a slot, just, having that faith from Coach Curry, Coach TA, just it's been really awesome for me. So just, continuing to work and hone in on those skills while practicing against literally the best in the world. So
who are some of the guys that you found like the biggest, that's how NFL guys are on offense when you matched up with them?
I mean, I think the biggest in coverage, definitely this guy right here, Scotty Miller, is definitely different, just how fluid they are in their routes. And even in college, the tight ends, you have some good ones, don't get me wrong, but a lot of times they're blocking tight ends and stuff. But even Darnell, who's 6'8", I don't know how much he weighs, but, he can run a crisp route. He's pretty fast. So just, every single person that you go against, every tight end, every running back, you have to be on your A game.
What's your anxious level as far as wanting to put the pads on in August so you guys can get the hitting, just kind of get the first hits out the way and start to get into the real work?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, people up here don't know me like people did back home, but I mean, that's what I live for. I love practicing, but right now I feel like, I mean, we're just in underwear almost practicing, right? Like I can't wait to get to Latrobe, and those first few days we're going to be acclimating, but then after that, once we get those pads on, I mean, that's really when you showcase who you are and how well you can play.
So a few things here, Nick. I've always loved talking to Payton Wilson. The guy is he thinks that what he's talking about. The guy is a very smart football player. I've always gotten a really good sense that he has his head in the right places and he can talk a lot of football. But I think it's interesting how when I was asking him, what he's already doing, he's already being included in a lot of the dime situations. The Steelers want to use him in his coverage skills early on. Nick, do you think that holds up in the season, that we see plenty of playing time and lots of snaps for Payton Wilson? Or do you think this is more so just they're just introducing the rookie, getting him used to things, and he's going to ride pine for most of the season?
Well, if Cole Holcomb's not ready, I think he's the pretty clear 3. So, in the passing down situations, it definitely feels like he would be the guy there, even though I think Landon Roberts, to his credit, really did a nice job last year in those passing down situations when he was forced to do them. But I think ideally, E-Rob is your downhill thumper on downs 1 and 2 that just smashes things, right? And the reason why I love Payton Wilson's third down versatility in dime, nickel, whatever you have there in obvious passing situations, it's not just because he's super athletic and can cover ground. We know that. He's a crazy athlete. He's moved all around the field. He can be a Tampa 2 pull runner, can be, as he talked about, this quasi slot guy that's kind of zoning over the middle. But what he can really do is blitz extremely well. He's a phenomenal blitzer. Chris, when you talk about, him wanting to hit Latrobe, I thought that was one of his most underrated traits. He would line up off the edge in NC State's defense and legitimately have pass rush moves that he would just dust tackles with. Certainly, tight ends and running backs couldn't just 1v1 him. So I think there's so many versatile ways they could use him on late downs. So I don't think he's going to start next to Patrick Queen. I think it'll be Patrick Queen and Landon Roberts starting.
Right.
And we'll kind of see where Cole Holcomb comes along. I think that's the whole wild card. But, I think right away he can easily be a sub-package player that gives you this crazy coverage versatility. But what I would be really excited to see is, maybe you get a loss on first down, maybe it's like 2nd and 12 where you could bring him in and put him and Patrick Queen there, or even him and Landon Roberts, if you really wanted to get Queen off the field for a snap or two, just elite blitzing linebacker duos. I think you can do so much up front with that idea in mind. Like with the front they're going to have, I think that these guys could really be very, very disruptive from the second level in the blitz game.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways that he can be dynamic in this defense, because this is a guy who not only is fast, not only is quick, not only is big, but he's instinctual. Like, that's something I brought up to him in the question. Like, hey, I love just watching you in the ACC, just read and react to fill the hole, to attack. And part of it was also early in his career, he was very reckless. And that's what got him injured often, was he would just throw his whole body into everything at 90 miles an hour. And it was just like, buddy, that's how you get killed. But to do it with form, with technique, to do it and do it in the smart ways while also still including those instincts, those are the things that I think he's gotten better at in college. And I want to see how better he is when things are moving much faster at the NFL level. And I do think Payton Wilson's going to get a lot of snaps. I think that he's going to be in there. He's going to be the third linebacker. I mean, look at how many times Mark Robinson stepped on the field for a bit. Look at the practice squad guys they had to line up in there when all the linebackers got hurt at one point in the season. He's going to get significant snaps, and I also think that if he excels in those snaps, he's going to be you're going to start seeing it's going to start off with like a heavy Patrick Queen, heavy Landon Roberts, light Payton Wilson. But then by like maybe week 10, 11, if Payton Wilson's playing well, they might be including him a little bit more so that it's more 50-50 between him and Roberts, while Patrick Queen's still the main primary linebacker.
I know we've seen it in the past where they've had this 3-3-5 package, which is usually 3 outside linebackers. Would not surprise me if Payton Wilson becomes that third linebacker in that package. I just think they can do so much with him. He's a guy that's interesting. When I was watching him, I got a lot of Isaiah Simmons from him. When Isaiah Simmons was coming out of Clemson, just this uber athlete for this size, played everywhere. I think Payton Wilson was a little positionless on his film at NC State, which is good and bad because I think he has to learn a little bit of playing stack linebacker, specifically against the run, where he's going to have to, face guys climb to the second level, how to stack and shed consistently. I think that's one part of his game that we're going to have to see, because sometimes you talk about his recklessness. I think he could still play a little bit like a chicken with his head cut off, where he just gets, pushed out of the way or can't shed a block specifically from that spot. But I think his versatility in sub-package football right away is what makes him such an intriguing day one fit. We talk about the blitzing. We talk about the ability to be that linebacker in zone. He can man up on tight ends. He's done all of that. So you can put him in a defined role where you have him in coverage, using his athleticism in space and being a blitzer. And I think you can do so much with him. And I'm actually, I kind of just thought about that as we were kind of thinking about how that they had that 3-3-5 before. Highsmith was that before. They did a little bit of it with Herbig at times last year. I think this year, instead of, say, making it Herbig, and you could make it Herbig because Nick Herbig is a very skilled player in space too, I think you could make it Payton Wilson, because Payton Wilson has done so much off the edge as an overload blitzer that it would just come right to him naturally. And we know what he can do, man. The range he covers when he can drop back in coverage is special. So I think he's a fun player in terms of what you can do with sub-package football right away with him.
Absolutely. We'll keep an eye on all those things as OTAs resume Tuesday for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's Monday here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We'll have another show tomorrow to preview what we're looking forward there. But Nick, thanks so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
You can find me on X at Farabaugh FB right down there. Make sure to read the stuff over at SteelersNow.com. We got great stuff coming from OTAs, of course, and more coming. So make sure to check it all out.
Absolutely. He's Nick Farabaugh. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. Thanks again, everyone. We'll be back tomorrow with more on your Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.